My name is David Bornstein. I'm a journalist. I am a co-founder of the Solutions Journalism Network. I also write a column in the New York Times, co-write a column in the New York Times called Fixes, which looks at solutions to social problems and trying to understand how they work, what results they're getting, and what we can learn from them. The main thing is that journalists, most of the time, will report on an issue, a problem, dysfunction, malfeasance, something like that, but won't take it further and report on how people are responding to that problem so that people get sort of the whole story around that issue. So the purpose of solutions journalism is to create a framework and really a language for journalists to feel comfortable reporting on responses to social problems without feeling that they're sort of falling into anything that looks like advocacy or puffery. I think that there's a lot more examples out there now of really high quality solutions journalism. It's actually being called solutions journalism. It existed in the past, but there wasn't a category. So I think that that has helped people see that this is a sort of a respectable or a very legitimate form of journalism. The public now has choice at the level of the article rather than the level of the whole news organization. They used to buy the New York Times, which is a bundled product. Now they're essentially consuming individual stories one by one. And people really have a need to feel a sense of efficacy and control with their lives. If they care about issues, they need to understand both what the problems are and what we can do about them. It's really built into human nature. So I think journalism in the past hasn't really fully given people the kind of information that they ultimately would want if they want to be powerful and effective citizens in a democracy or just in their communities. The current model of journalism or the current approach to journalism was very much shaped by the Vietnam War, by the Pentagon Papers, by Watergate. There was a much cozier relationship to power in journalism, which is shown very clearly in the movie about the Washington Post, the recent movie. People reacted to the Vietnam War particularly with the sense that they are no longer going to not look under the hood when the government tells them something. And I think what happened was people reacted with, they went from that cozy relationship to a kind of hyper-cynicism, where our job is to sort of look at the spin that people are giving us all the time. And I think journalism is now moving out of this hyper-cynical role into a more balanced sense of actually people are sometimes trying to solve problems, and our job is not just to try to catch people in their lies every time that they say something. And I think that, so the hyper-cynicism was a healthy corrective, and I think we now have to correct the corrective. We don't actually use the positive-negative frame. Those are sort of like whether the news makes you feel better or makes you feel worse. I think the main thing to look at with the news is it helping you understand the nature of a problem, or is it helping you understand the nature of what can be done about it? So the informational content is different than the affective content, how it makes you feel. And I think it's more important to look at actually what's the information that people need to have in order to build the community that they want to build. And I think if you give people that, you'll find that people will respond well to it because it makes them feel more powerful. That doesn't mean that it will necessarily get more clicks, but it's more likely that people will stay with those stories and that those stories will have longer impact. I would say in general, solution stories show possibilities that people may not be aware of. In that sense, they are positive. But the typical solutions story is a story of underperformance. It's typically a story that shows that we have a big problem in society. Here are a few places that seem to be doing better against this problem. We might be able to learn from them. It's not saying we don't have a big problem. We still have a big problem, but it's showing that we probably could do better against this problem, and there are places we can learn from. So in fact, it's feedback that we're not doing as well as we could. That's typically what solutions journalism shows. And here's ways that we could perhaps do better if we learned from these examples. So we're covering the exceptions, what we call sometimes the positive deviants. And in covering those positive deviants, we help people understand that there may be light at the end of the tunnel, but they may still be in the tunnel. So it's really a mixed story. And I have found over and over that these stories, while they do help you see pathways forward, they're also reminding you that we have not got this problem just yet. So in that sense, it's a sobering story, not necessarily a positive story, but it can be a helpful, sobering story. Well, I would say it really begins at the level of the editors. Editors ultimately, when they have reporters working on, or the reporters themselves, on issues, we're regularly asking the question, okay, you covered this issue, is anyone doing better against this problem? We've covered the school that has the bullying problem. We've covered the homelessness on our streets. We've covered the hospitals that are, that have high infection rates. We've covered the schools where the students aren't graduating. Now we need to actually look at where are the places that are doing better against some of these problems, because we actually care that these institutions get better. In some cases, just asking the question, is anyone doing better or who's doing better, forces the reporter to do more work. Well, I don't know. In most cases, the answer might be, I don't know. I haven't thought about that question. In which case, okay, let's go see. There may be a second-day story that we can add on to the story that you've done. And it really is just completing, what we call it the whole story. The first story is understanding what's wrong. What do we need to focus on? The next story is what can we do about it? Is there anything that we can learn that we can do about it? There's activity around this problem. It's not just causing it. There's also activity around responding to it. And it's important for people to know that that's going on too. Just to realize that they live in a society that's full of people who actually care and are trying to solve problems. That's the reality. Why not let them know about it? So I would say audiences respond to news that helps them understand all the dimensions of a story. So, once again, if we're looking at rates of poverty in a community, people will be engaged if they understand the problem, how deep it goes, and they also understand what's happening at the level of people who are working on job training, or in the schools, or with families, or whatever it is. How are people responding to this problem? When you actually integrate the news, integrate all those elements into the news, people find it easier to engage, especially with difficult subjects. And they find it easier to stay with those stories, because it's just very hard to absorb a litany of stories about how terrible everything is. And it's very hard for people to consume a product on a regular basis that makes them feel hopeless and powerless. People will reject the product. As we see now, we see more than a third of Americans avoid the news. This was a research from the Reuters Institute. That's because it's not that they don't care about their communities or they're indifferent, it's that it's just become too hard to engage with this feeling that sort of everything is messed up and no one's doing anything about it. So I would say that that's what people respond to, a news product that's integrated with all the different elements.